Hello, my name is Aida and I work for YMCA North Staffordshire. I'm also a board member of the West Midlands Remembering Srebrenica charity. As we commemorate 26th anniversary of Srebrenica genocide and all the atrocities committed in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we honor and remember all the innocent victims and their families. Despite harrowing experiences they suffered as children, some Bosnians, like Mirsad Selakovic and Sanela Saracevic-Vujic, managed not only to use their negative experience to rebuild their own lives, but also to support and help the lives of both British and Bosnians in overcoming their traumas, hatred, and discrimination. I wish to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of the individuals, organizations, and institutions across the UK that have been helping the work of an amazing Remembering Srebrenica charity. Remembering how divisive and devastating hatred can be in today's society is important, but only when followed by actions, no matter how big or small. I hope you can join us. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Daniel Flynn and I'm Chief Executive of the YMCA. It gives me great pleasure and honour this year, particularly this year, to honour Aida Horton, MBE. Aida's been recognised for the fantastic work that she's done in raising awareness of the terrible, evil genocide that happened in Srebrenica 26 years ago. 8,000 men and boys were ripped from their families, taken into camps and moved on to death. What makes it even worse is these people, the atrocities were trying to cover up, where these men, these humans, were ripped to pieces literally. We have to remember this. We have to remember this evil. And YMCA's been working with Aida for the past 5 years. And in that past 5 years, we've sent young people to Srebrenica. Every single one comes back changed. Every single one comes back with stories of horror. But also on the other side, stories of joy and hope. And this year's theme is about rebuilding lives. Often those lives of our brothers and sisters in this country. Brothers and sisters like Aida, who have had to rebuild their lives from such a terrible place. Remember, 26 years ago, most of these people were kids, young people without dads. Yesterday was Father's Day and I was very blessed by my kids and very touched. 8,000 families can't do that. More than 8,000 families can't do that. So this year, Remembrance Week is running between the 5th and the 11th of July, and the actual Memorial Day service is on the 9th at 11. We hope we can gather, but that may be online for obvious reasons this year. The theme of this year is about rebuilding lives again. And we've got some amazing people. Stories of Miroslav Selakovic. He's an actor currently living in Britain. You've seen him on telly. The Boy Who Said Nothing, the horrible story. Very difficult to read, but please read it. It's important. The story of a father and a son, when he was a boy, were taken into a death camp and tortured. And the lifelong effect on that. We talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. There's no reason for such horror and violence other than hatred. And that leaves a long, long tail. And it's up to all of us to get alongside each of us and stand in empathy with each other. We can't understand, coming from England, coming from Britain, where the horrors that these people went through. And I remember one of the most horrible things that Aida explained, that horror and evil came within weeks. 4 weeks earlier, she told me about dancing together as a young person in a disco in Srebrenica, all different sorts of people groups, dancing, doing the normal things teenagers do. 4 weeks later, those same teenagers, some of them wanted to kill the others. That's how quickly evil comes. So it's up to all of us, isn't it, to stand in solidarity against evil, against this horrible, horrible thing that emerged. And that's why it's important that we remember. It's the 26th year that we remember. And this year, the story again, as I've said, is about rebuilding lives. The other fantastic story, and she'll also be talking, a young woman called Selena. Claire Findlay was a mum in Scotland, just a regular mum. And she was watching the news and heard about the horrors like we all did. And then she heard about an aeroplane that wouldn't take off from the airport because there were children on board, 21 children who didn't have an address to go to. So Claire Findlay, good on her, and this is what we can do, said, I'll take them all, every single one. And they came with only 4 mums. Claire thought the rest of the mums had died, and that was terrible, that was it. But actually, in a school across the way, there was a boarding school. There was a young woman who could speak Serbo-Croat and Bosnian, and she came across, and then they discovered that every single one of these mums was alive. They were in a camp, in an internment, horrible camp. Now, Claire lobbied and challenged and campaigned, and all of those mums were reunited with all of those children. That's a miracle. But those miracles we read about and we see in the midst of all the horror of death in Srebrenica and in Bosnia-Herzegovina. There are so many stories that give us hope and life. It's up to us to join together to remember these wonderful people. It's up to us to link hands in our humanity, particularly these days that feel quite divided. It's up to us to unify and to remember and to honour those amazing lives. We've been working together with AIDA for the past 5 years at the YMCA, and I'm pleased to report that YMCA England, the national body, are going to take this on and join us in the remembrance. Tell your friends, tell your family. The limited experience I have with conflict is people need to hear. Stories of horror are buried and hidden. Let's shine the light of love and unity and solidarity together this year and remember those wonderful human beings who are just like us, families, mums, dads, friends. Thank you for listening, and God bless.
My name is Aida, and I work for YMCA North Staffordshire. I'm also a board member for West Midlands Remembering Srebrenica charity. These days, media were crowded with the story of Claire Findlay and her husband Andrew, who in 1992 took in 25 refugees from Bosnia, 21 child and 4 mothers, thinking that some of the children were orphans. Originally, their intention was to take in 1 orphan or possibly 2 siblings for the period of 3 months, but they were told that none could leave the country unless they had the address. So they gave their own address and all of them came to their home. Thanks to a 16-year-old Petra Lovrekovic, a pupil in local school, this is how actually Claire was finally able to communicate with the children, as none spoke English. And also they have found out that actually some of the children, or none of the children actually, were orphans. Since that moment, Claire did everything she could to reunite these children with their parents. Well, I was deeply touched with this story, just like anybody else who would read or hear about it. I never realized that for about 2 years now, I have been a friend with one of these children. Last week, she sent me the message that struck me to the core. The message was very simple. It included a link and one line to say, "Did you recognize me?" When I clicked on the link, this is the story that revealed before me, and it left me in a state of shock. For now, I could hear firsthand how one of those children felt at the time. I feel so privileged to be able to share her story with you today. So let me welcome Sanela and thank her for her time and courage to face the traumas of the past. Sanela, thank you so much for being with us today. Can you please, for starters, tell us a bit about your life before the war? Where do you come from and what was your life all about?
Sure, Ada. Hi. Um, Before the war, Ada, in 1992, we had everything. We had a normal life, peaceful life. We went to school, we went to excursion trips, played games outside, and kept interesting hobbies. As a child, I've always been a person that actually remembers everything, everything to the actual detail. I remember before leaving, and to this day now, I remember my old great granddad's house where I grew up. I remember a house which was being built just before the war, which was going to be our new house. I actually remember most of the furniture, the detail of every color, where everything was, put trees in my garden, um, street houses, which were belonged to our neighbors, what they had in their own garden and what they had in their own windows. There's so much more where I could actually write you a book and have a pages of colorful images of my happy childhood. I had mum and dad, great grandfather who looked after us while mum and dad were at work. So he was to me everything. He passed away during the war. I had an older brother who's a couple of years older than me. We had a very good relationship.
So, what was the reason that your family kind of had to flee your hometown? Was it they were told to leave, or was it they just felt like it would be safer for the family if you leave?
As the war, Ada, started progressing and extending to each town in Bosnia, obviously it has been said, as children, you kind of overhear things, even though your parents try to avoid you from hearing the worst stories, that would obviously ruin your life. But we've obviously been told that each day, each week, each town has been surrounded by Serbs. And if you stay, you know that you will be killed. But if you could find a way to escape, that is your last chance. So what happened, I remember it was late afternoon that day, rumors came round to our street that a few people have already been killed in different streets. And somehow they managed to allocate a few buses, about the coach normally, stage 4 buses, at a location. I think I remember there were 4 buses, and you had to pay to escape. So if you didn't have money, you would have to beg and borrow it from family members. So money was given, I don't know who to, but they managed to put us in the bus. And I remember we were just driving, they were driving us through different areas. While driving, we were able to see dead bodies, injured people where you can't do nothing, you can't even help them, and crying children and babies. They stopped us near a place called Travnik, and they asked us to take some water and go to the toilet if needed. And I remember drinking from a little river that was going through Travnik. I was very thirsty because we weren't even allowed to take any baggage with us or any food. We just left. When we were drinking water, I can hear someone in the background shouting, "Stop drinking that water." Yesterday at early hours in the morning, 200 to 300 pounds, which 200 to 300 people, which I can't remember exact now, figure, were actually massacred and killed and thrown into that river. When the bus stopped after probably driving us another 20 miles, unfortunately the driver wasn't allowed to carry us further. He stopped and said, "This is the route that you need to take now by walking, and it's about 40 kilometers. So I want you to walk, but don't go back. When you get to the place, which is called whatever it was at the time, please remember to not turn left, you turn right. Because if you turn left, you will not survive." So I remember everybody shouting at us and saying, "Yes, we turn right, so we have to turn right." So we walked for 40 kilometers. So I remember saying, yes, I saw a dead body, and one person that stayed in me for the rest of my life and will never go away. I saw someone's great grandfather lying down on a pavement, killed, with his eyes taken out.
That must have been absolutely horrendous experience for a 12-year-old, isn't it?
Yes, And there's been children younger than me walking, crying, being carried by their parents. One of my friends, Emina, she's in Claire's story as well. She's now in America. I remember with them, they had their grandma who was very ill, and I think they had to carry her in the wheelchair because there's been ways and roads that we had to walk through. It wasn't suitable for a wheelchair. So I can just go back and think how hard that was for them to walk 40 kilometers and hold their grandma. But I didn't because it was forever. I remember being tired, but I never cried. I was always that kind of kid again, just to look at my mum and dad and see that they were so scared and worried that I had to pretend that, you know, I'm okay. I'm dying inside and I'm, you know, so scared, but I'm okay because I just want to, you know, help.
Can you tell us a little bit about this image, because you said you couldn't take anything away?
This image stayed in here, and I've always thought of the picture, but I was never able to have the picture for memories to show to my children. Because when we left, walked away, closed the door, didn't even lock it, and carried on towards the bus. So you can imagine any personal belongings that you have in your life, any clothes, anything, like whatever you're wearing now, that's how I left my home. And not only until last year, which is, you know, it's been years and years, that I remember talking to one of my neighbors about you know, you're lucky to have some memories with you, because they had some memories because their house was not burned, mine was burned. As soon as we leave our town that day and went with the buses, they came back and burned pretty much every house they could, but there's few that stayed behind. So my neighbor, who's my age now, we went to school together, he says, I have something for you. And I couldn't think, you know, I maybe I thought it's a saucepan, because when you burn a house, some things like that stay behind. And he showed me a picture, which is the one that we've just seen, and I will cherish that forever because that's all I have as a memory when I was a child. I'd like to cherish that photograph is because my next door neighbor's mum has passed away, and she meant a lot to me. And in the back of that picture, it says his name and a friend's name, because he was her son. Don't forget to buy bread and milk. Sometimes, if you look back at years back, maybe the picture was used to write a note, and she did. She wrote a note to her son. I love seeing that. When we arrived at Srebrenica, I think it was 4 o'clock in the morning, they managed to place us into an old school. It was like a sports hall where they had loads of mattresses for us and nothing else. And that's where we stayed, I think, for quite a few weeks. We had charities come over and obviously provide us with food. And mainly all we had was one meal a day. And then when I remember thinking back a few weeks and being in Boston Ski Festival, I had everything. I could have anything I want. I had big garden with fruit trees growing throughout, where I can just go and pick any plums or any tree, any apples and peaches I want. Being in Srebrenica, I remember one woman eating an apple. And I think I stared at her until she finished eating that apple. All I wanted was an apple. Two men, I think, came into the sports hall and said to parents, you haven't got much time, so if you can, whichever child you decide to put on that piece of paper, please do it, because you haven't got time, so think about your children, get them to a safe territory, and this is a chance that we'll never get again, probably. So they put, my mum and dad put both of our names down. But I was too upset to leave, because I've also always thought about my great grandfather, who was at the time in Toulouse. He was too old, you know, and it's better for him to leave, because if not, for the age that he is, he could be obviously going into the fighting zone, and that's not what any parent wants to see. They actually arrived in a small private plane jet. So my brother was with Claire and Andrew Findlay for quite a while, and the rest of the children. And I think quite a few nice, nice and kind people in Scotland got in touch with Claire and Andrew and offered their support. One of the families called John and Sonia Cantaloupe, and they came forward and asked Claire if they could help and take away one or two children of her, so that it would be easier for her until the rest of the parents unite. So that's what happened.
Basically, the reason why you came to UK then was because Claire found out that actually the children were not orphans and that they had their mothers still alive and back in Bosnia, and obviously she did her best and she to reunite you, and bless her, she managed to do that as well.
Because we managed to escape Travnik maybe a week to 2 weeks after my brother left for Scotland. We lived in a place called Novigrad for quite a few months, and then John and Sonia arrived, and they obviously came in with the papers, the correct papers that we needed, as that was the procedure at the time to be able to leave Croatia.
It's just amazing how total strangers do amazing things for people they've never met in their life. But I'm sure that your gratitude is immense for this couple.
Sonia had passed away. If it wasn't for these people, we will never know what would actually happen to us. So we would be grateful forever. And I will tell my children, and my children can tell their children, that I was still the same child like I always was. But something else happened where when the food was provided to me or given to me, I just remember putting my head down and saying no thank you, even though I was so hungry and I wanted it. I didn't know if that was just being polite or it's because someone else is paying for that. I just felt something happened to me in the refugee camp. I became very vulnerable and shy, that I wouldn't talk to anyone. You feel useless as well because you can't talk. You can't actually tell them. And I would have loved to raise my hand up and say, can I just tell you what I saw yesterday?
Even know where did you came from or what happened?
You know, days after they put us into a school, just an ordinary secondary school. It was called Forest Academy, and couldn't speak a word of English, and it was very intimidating. But I stayed strong. I stayed strong. I did have my own corners when I would, for example, find it very difficult to eat lunch with anyone. So I would probably eat lunch in the toilet. I would self-isolate from everyone because I found it, and that was the only way to carry on. And didn't last long. I started obviously speaking basic English and made a few friends, and then they managed to get us a support teacher as well to help us with our language. And she's been an amazing. I left Scotland in 2002, and I took away with me some Scottish accent, and it's something that I absolutely love, and I'm hoping that it doesn't go away. Being there, starting a new life, meeting new people, learning a new language, it kind of blocked seeing the things that I did see while running away from my own hometown. But it came back. Every time you have some time to yourself, and every time you see still things on TV, things are always brought back. But I have lost so many members of the family, sons, fathers, that they were actually never found. That we've just had to carry on. But inside every single one of us, there's this other person that lives there that we just don't speak about. And then when Srebrenica genocide anniversary comes every year, it brings so much emotions to everyone. regardless of how your escape was, whether it was an easy escape or tortured, it doesn't matter. You bring everything back, especially for those people who have lost very, very close members of their family. The first time we went back, it's been a strange moment because and it looked a little bit different. It was very emotional. It was beautiful. It was very, very beautiful. It felt a little bit like not home, but that's because my great granddad's not there. Some people that I remember are not there. They've either passed away or died and killed in the war. So, you start having dreams and traumas again.
Because I know that Bosanski Petrovac had, I would say, majority Serb population there for a long time before the war.
Yes.
So what are the relations now?
If you are a person who lost everyone or everything through the war, and you know who did that, I think those people I feel sorry for greatly because mental health comes in mind that must be really hard to live in a town, and they must be very strong people to be able to carry on and pass these people each grade. And I know in life we're all humans and we should all love and care for each other, but this did happen. So you can't just close your eyes and say, it's okay, I'll move on, because you do know some of these people who did things to other people are still out and about.
That's actually one thing that I remember from going to Srebrenica and meeting the mothers over there, mothers of Srebrenica, and with the delegation from YMCA and Stoke-on-Trent. And that is actually one thing that the mothers mentioned as well, that some people who have done horrible, horrible things to their loved ones are actually still out there walking freely. The fact that there's still denial out there that genocide and then persecution has happened. And that's something that it will be difficult to go forward until that is accepted by everybody, isn't it?
Absolutely. It has happened.
So you have definitely rebuilt your life, because when we met and I learned that you are actually a police officer, I was like very impressed. So basically, what better way for you to give back to the community that has helped you so much, but then to do one of the amazing professions that you do. So could you please tell us a bit more about what you do or have been doing for some years now?
All the time along with me was something else I always wanted to be, and that was to serve the community and be a police officer. And within the police, you have so many opportunities, and I had to start from basics. So what I did, I applied to become a police community support officer, because I think that's just your first way of engaging, protecting the community, finding out about the job itself. I worked for Warwickshire Police for 2 years, had an absolutely amazing time. I did a modern slavery event. I held a presentation for over 100 attendees. Through that, 2 days later, I was actually awarded a commendation. So that's something I will never be able to forget, because I was only in the job for 3 months. And I got in touch with different kinds of community, and through that, these communities approached me easier as well. They found it easier to talk to me because some of them couldn't speak well English, or they prefer to speak in a different language, which I was able to understand. I did that because I go back to how I was helped, how I was looked after to come to this country, and I was carrying on doing that. And then until 6 months ago, I joined Northamptonshire Police, and I am now a police constable, and I'm looking forward to carrying with the force and exploring different departments within the force. I'm very proud to be there.
Would you say that your experiences helped you be a better police constable?
Definitely. I think sometimes a person has it in them as well. They just want to help all the time. But I have so many examples when I was so being a refugee is left me with traumas, but through that I became a very strong woman, and for everything I've been through, if a person is struggling or whatever is going on in their life at the moment, I will always see that positive, and I will always be able to advise them and tell them to keep going. Because if I've managed to come here and rebuild a new life and be who I am, anybody can. Claire and Andrew were absolutely phenomenal, amazing people that I will be grateful, and my family and my friends for the rest of our lives. And I think again, I will never be able to forget Sonia, John, all her family, all her friends and neighbours and cousins that used to come and bring us loads of clothes. So yes, I'm very grateful to every single one of them, and I will never be able to forget what they've done. The most important lesson I can share to a young generation and people in general: be honest, be kind, don't judge. Have respect for others and share the love. If we can all do this, we will be a better place. It is extremely important to commemorate and remember what happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially knowing that my friends, their families and neighbours were brutally killed because they were Muslims. Keeping the memory alive is important to honour the victims and survivors, and also encourage all of us to continue to strive to build a society that is inclusive and free from hatred. 25 years on, the survivors of Srebrenica are still fighting to have their voice heard. The strength of survivors in sharing their stories and fighting for justice inspires us to take action. The Srebrenica Memorial Day, therefore, is important not just as an act of remembrance, but as a lesson for generations to come. I want children of today who did not grow up with those terrible scenes of genocide on their televisions to not only know what happened in that Bosnian enclave, but also pledge never again. I will continue to share what happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I hope you will too. Thank you, everybody.
A perfect way of us ending this interview. Thank you so much, Danella, for sharing your story. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so my name is Aida, and I work for YMCA North Staffordshire, but I'm also a board member of West Midlands Remembering Srebrenica charity. For this year's topic, the theme of rebuilding lives, I wanted to introduce you to an amazing person that I met, well, now I think 2 or 3 years ago. When I first met Mirsad Solakovic, he was very shy, you know, and you wouldn't think that he has gone through so much. And I was so privileged that I was actually able to learn about his book, which he wrote about his experiences. And the book is called The Boy Who Said Nothing, about his experiences of Bosnian War as a 13-year-old boy, which we will obviously touch base today. So Mirsad, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us. And obviously you have a little one there. Who's that? Hello.
This is little Adam.
Adam, hello.
He's very lively and inquisitive.
Of course. That's how we like them. That's fine. So Mirsad, when now I can say that you have so many titles to your name. So it's a actor, it's an author, public speaker, but you're also a Bosnian War survivor.
Yes.
So can you please introduce yourself a bit?
I'm Mirsad Solakovic. I come from northwest of Bosnia, Kozarac. It's a small town, and known to people. It's a little suburb of a town, mixed of 36 villages. a beautiful place to describe. It's full of greenery, full of mountains, full of love, life, and prosperity before the war during Yugoslavia.
How old were you then? You were just a boy, weren't you?
Yeah, I was 13 years old child, growing up amongst 36 other nationalities that lived there. So from Ukrainian, Polish, Orthodox, Christians, Roman Catholics, Greek Catholics, Muslims, Jewish. We all lived there. After the Second World War, we had different settlers coming and finding refuge in little town Kozarets. It was a fairy tale life before the war. Everybody got on, everybody celebrated each other's differences. And we were living like one big family. During my life in UK, I always say passionately and with a huge pride on my shoulders that I never knew what religion I was. I never knew there are different religions. All I knew is about love and peace. And I thought we all followed the same religion. And we had different buildings to go to. Someone had a building to go to church. Somebody had a building to go to synagogue. And we went to mosque. However, when the war started in Slovenia, which lasted a couple of weeks and then moved down to Croatia, it didn't really emphasize that we will be affected in the same way. We thought the war is too far away. We'll escape it. We got wonderful neighbors. We have a wonderful community. And we had a strong will that we'll support each other. However, when first grenades fell, I felt people start panicking and saying, the war is at our door. I didn't even know in practical terms what it meant, that the war brings hatred, discrimination, that it divides people, that people have to die, people get injured, people lose their family members. All of these traumatic things were thrown at the shoulders of a 13 years old child, witnessing straight away family members disappearing, family members dying, family members going through the sorrow, pain of war, not having food, water, basic necessities for life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then horrible things started happening in your area, didn't they? And
yeah,
obviously most of the details people will be able to find in your book. But if you could, just a little bit tell us about that, how you basically ended up in Britain, what kind of led to you being here today?
Yeah, one of the things that I remember, my dad was very passionate about saying that I have wonderful friends and neighbors that will support us, that will get us out of this chaos, that will defend us. And he had arguments with his own family members saying the slaughter, the killings, the mass murders, the genocide will never appear in our area. It will never reach our doors. But unfortunately, those things were one of the first things that happened to us. And it seems to be the neighbor turn against the neighbor, friend against friend. Somebody that had an argument in the past, it turned out that it would be a perfect opportunity to resolve those issues by putting a bullet in someone's head, or killing their child, killing their family members, or wiping out the whole generation. Now, they started with shelling, which was a norm of any war, from the hills of Kosovo. I mean, we as a kids, we've seen army vehicles passing through our streets to go into the mountains, never knew that those same tanks and Yugoslavian army would turn against us. All our family members paid taxes towards those same weapons that were bought, that we felt proud about, that we would be a strong nation to defend ourselves against anybody that would attack our country. And what we found then, the concentration camps have been formed at Manjača, Keretem, Ternopolje.
Which is kind of surrounding villages around your area, isn't it, and places?
Yes, and initially, Omarska is one of the worst concentration camps where I've lost personally lots of family members. That are all written in a book, you know. The difficult part about life and war and telling the story after the war, as I'm getting older, I find it more and more difficult to enter those feelings. It affects me really badly. And I'm beginning to feel like there has to be an end of digging into those stories, because it seems that you cannot move on, and it affects me badly for a couple of weeks after the interviews, after the recordings, after the thinking about it. Now, one of the things that we would never imagine or comprehend was that the school where I was raised, where I was educated, where I was taught about good mannerisms, good values, good prosperity of life, to be a good martial Titus pioneer.
Yeah.
To love the country, to protect the country, to give your life for the country. The same system has turned against us. And I ended up, as many family members, in school that was turned into concentration camp. But at first they were saying that they were not concentration camps. They were set out there for people to be processed, to be asked whether they had any involvement with any parties, they were in any political parties, whether people had weapons to defend themselves in territorial army, and any little thing really that, you know, maybe you've had a little argument with a neighbor because of your land or something. He affected people where they were literally, their lives were taken away. Going around the school and seeing your teachers marching around and being guards of concentration camp. That was school a couple of months ago. That must be bad. And you tend to walk up to your teacher and say, you know, can you support us, protect us? And then you got your family member pulling you strongly with your shoulder, saying, do not show your face, because I've heard such and such stories of a same person doing such atrocities. You know, and I wouldn't like to go in much details of every particular incident. It's it has been described in the book quite well, and
Yes.
For people to enter the feelings and emotions, it's only through the words. Probably has more feelings to it.
Yes.
Yeah,
I do apologize. I know it's very emotional, and I do apologize for bringing the bad memories. But what actually amazes me about you, Mirsad, is that despite your time in the concentration camps and all the losses you had, you ended up in the UK and you ended up doing amazing things, which you can mention, of course, in a bit. But actually, what shocked me as well in your book was that when you arrived to UK, it wasn't just roses. You know, a lot of people think when refugees come to UK that, you know, they are after all the benefits and, you know, like all the glamour or all the wealth of the UK or anywhere else in Europe. But actually, you were just a boy, you know, who experienced some bullying as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I think the challenges kind of started to follow me on throughout the life, trying, and I said it many times to strangers and the people that I meet through my work, through traveling, through connecting with different people, is when you lose that nest of people, your roots, where you were raised, where you were taught about mannerisms, respect towards elderly people, education, and everyday things that we try to install in our children to give them a good life. Once you lose those people, you become an empty person. And how do you rebuild that? You know, your family members are literally fighting for their existence. They're facing new challenges. They've got a new life, new country, surrounded with new people. We're literally back in 90s, we didn't have no interpreters, we didn't have no social workers. We were thrown in houses that weren't really habitable at the time. Two families were living together. We were lucky that we had dad, and he was quite handy. He could absolutely do anything. And we were living with family from Sarajevo. Their father was literally fighting. And Nisa, who had two children, about the same age as me and my sister, they've struggled even more because they didn't have a man in the household, and lots of kids. I was fortunate enough to have a father with me, and their upbringing by a single parent and torn away from the war. Most of those men were killed during the war. Some of them were lucky enough to survive, and they couldn't get out. The life was a struggle. He was a real struggle. And all of a sudden, you know, I kept thinking about back home. I kept thinking about the family members. It's, you don't digest or you don't process the death or the bad experience until you are in a safe area. It's a human way of surviving because the body's constantly fighting to survive. And here we go, you know, as soon as I was put near the kids, like you said it rightly, I was shy. But it wasn't shyness, it was more than, as a 13 years old child, the trauma they've experienced. I went in a silent mode for a good couple of years. And parents, you know, mom shielded me as someone who is shy, doesn't communicate well. But, you know, kids pick on that, and they were picking on me. And when I've had bad experience in Bosnia, when I've experienced torture and beating up in front of my family, one thing I've learned about myself, that I'm stuck here by myself, and I'm the one that any minute the bullet can strike my head. And I was put on execution spot, so I was on my own, and I've had to find a way of surviving or getting that bullet as soon as possible. You know, you get questioned, a 13-year-old child, by 5-6 people, and you know, with hand grenades in your hand, with putting an execution spot that's shooting above your head, and all of that. And then your next family's watching as an audience. It's something unimaginable. And I've learned that I'm on my own, and calling out. They've asked me to call for help from my dad, which made things even more severe and hard. My mom had epilepsy, and since that day, 28 years ago, she still suffers with epilepsy, and it takes every time. It takes so much of her life. But once I've heard an expression, a quote, when I met Mike Tyson about a first meeting with him, which was kind of a difficult. He wouldn't shake my hand, and I got angry. So we've been introduced by Mike Tyson by my good friend Joe Egan, and his Tyson is good, and he's got good values and all of that. The media tell us completely different picture. For my experience, straight away, I've agreed with media. He's really hard person to get on, and I got my hand out to give him a nice handshake, and he refused it. Yet my brother went after me, and he even hugged him. So walked off, and I swore at him in Bosnian. And I didn't manage to get a couple hundred yards. He's calling me, says, call that Bosnian guy. And I felt my legs were cut off for a minute. He's got a reputation, and I swore at him, which I thought there's no way you understand. His bodyguards come over, and everybody were already looking at us, and there was about 2,000-3,000 people in the hall. And now my brother went up to him and says, everything okay? He says, he just swore at me, didn't he? He says, I got a lot of Bosnian friends in America, and I thought, I woke up to the guy and I said, I did swear at you, yeah. And he says, do you want me to tell you what I swore at you? He says, yeah, well, I'd love it. He says, oh, you wouldn't shake my hand. I had a Sarajevo top, and he says Sarajevo. And the way he gets angry very quickly, I have the same problem. And I really connected with that feeling. He says, I've seen you, you're a built guy and intimidating, and I've seen that Serbian top across. And he said, I don't want to shake hands with someone who's done such atrocities towards innocent Bosnians. And I cried in front of him. And then he looked at me and he said, it's not Serbia, it's Sarajevo, it's the capital city of Bosnia. And it's amazing how human beings respond so quickly to sorrow, hatred, and bad situations, the war, and what Serbs have done. I'm not saying all the Serbs are the same. I'm not saying all the Serbs have done atrocities,
Of course not.
and bad, but it looks like we tend to picture out as it happened and how the war was planned, and the structure, and the attacks, and the concentration camps, and how innocent civilians, women and children were killed, the worst atrocities after the Second World War towards Jews. And what was interesting, he calls me to the table they sat down, and he's doing his evening dinner talk. And then he introduced, said, this is a Bosnian guy, survival through the war. And he addresses the audience saying, which was very bizarre. There were Frank Bruno was there was Amir Khan, there's a few well-known boxers. He said, I can see that this guy has been through lots of traumas, because I wouldn't necessarily find someone that just walks off with anger. And you knew that he swore at me, but I understand it. He says, I've been through lots of pain and anger and frustration. And he says, I've lost my mother when I was 13. I lost my father when I was 14. And if you don't go through the pain and sorrow, you will never be able to understand the pain. So going back to being a child, it was difficult. But having experienced the war, it wasn't so much of a challenge facing the bullies at school. And I think the kids are very good at observing things and raising questions. And it was the very same thing connecting now to Tyson's story. I could not communicate in so odd words that I would say. It'd be Bosnian, but I never spoke with no one. I would, I would say things in silently to them in Bosnian, and they found that very bizarre. But some things have changed. The things have realized, the kids have realized that I managed the bullying really well, and it's almost like they were saying to me that I enjoyed the pain. And when I started, by encouragement of teachers, to stand in front of assembly and face my bullies and people that treated me badly, I said the only thing that I was good at, it was receiving pain, and I became good at it. And I remember there was a teacher called Mrs. Hatton and Mrs. Haddington. They spent a lot of work trying to help me to communicate, to start learning English, to start embracing life as a child in school. Because quite often they would send me home. I'd be in isolation. I'd be sent home. I'd be in isolation. You've got social services. And my mom's worst fear was that, in Bosnia, you have, if somebody's got any psychological problems, the institutions would take you away and give you special education away from home. And she was really worried about that. And the assemblies and encouragement of Mrs. Hatton and Mrs. Hetherington and many more PE teachers, Mr. Manda, Mr. Hebden, Mr. Higginson, and so many to name. When I stood and said a couple of sentences in assembly, like I from Bosnia, child, war, killing, gun, me not like gun, simple words that I've learned. Because I was so concentrated looking at that paper and getting those words out. When I finished, it was only about 3-4 sentences. I've looked around and every single child, the bullied me, they were crying. The teachers were crying, the whole assembly were in tears. And it's the first time I've experienced what I experience on a daily basis. And it's changed me. From that day, I've seen a humanity and I thought, well, I need to enter people's feelings, to be able to educate them. The hatred, discrimination, killing, wars don't bring any good future for no one.
No.
It brings division, and it breaks people apart, and it hurts people. For me to hate someone, it hurts me, and I choose not to, despite everything that I've been through.
Yeah, that's amazing. Would you say that, because I know you are involved in sport a lot, so would you say that having that one thing to kind of hold on to helped you along the way?
Yeah, that's what one of the main reasons I mentioned a couple of those teachers, where we as a family, we all come from a bodybuilding background, sports people. And one of the things that even we lived on in a countryside on a farm, we had a well-known family member, Fikret Hadjic, who was well-known in the world. His father was there because Fikret Hadjic was killed, even though many celebrities, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, were saying that he should get out. But he was saying, no, I'm a celebrity here. He had the same understanding of the situation at the time as my dad. My people will defend our town, and I will defend and help people through the war, but he was one of the first victims, in fact, Fikret Hajic. So Arnold helped the community tremendously, and it kind of echoes even today how much that letter meant to us as a family, and just lifting our spirits up and saying, well, somebody recognizes he was 15 years Mr. Yugoslavia every single year. And Arnold himself quotes, he says, there's no bodybuilder in the world even now that had the titles for his country 15 years consequently. And we had a huge less. And he encouraged me to do weight training. We had a room that was made in a weight training room by Mr. Hepton. And he's encouraged me to start training. I mean, with 3-4 months, my muscles were bulging like balloons. And the kids started pointing out, oh, that's the guy with bully. Look at the muscles that he was hiding. And I didn't need to communicate to all of a sudden turn things around and start teaching people how to build muscles. And that's where the positive things started in my life. And a sport is amazing thing to bring people together, to bring those similarities that we all have in common as human beings, and to forget about those little differences that we might have. And we set up a charity called United Citizen in Kosarat, pretty much, you know, in the name of Fikret Hajic, to respect the achievements in bodybuilding he had. So we set up the whole fitness facilities in a shopping center, 3rd floor. And even today, it's one of the most amicable things that we have on our street. I always quote different organizations were trying to work and do workshops with kids to bring them together. Serbs, Croats, the kids with different nationalities after the war. But kind of all of them work until a certain point, and then they don't work. But through the sports, they always work, because they always come to keep fit. And that's one of the things that I hold it very proud, that we have now over 30 members, a regular, they all train, and we never had no incidents inside the gym. And the kids really started integrating together after the war. They started talking about their problems. And in a small town like Kosarat, you have to embrace in your community values to be able to survive, because you need a next door neighbor who's got a tractor to cultivate your land, to pick up your hay, to, you know, take your tomatoes to market, to sell it. And then it's a chain, and they cannot live kind of isolated. They have to integrate and have to work together. And it's one of the things that really works, and it's still out there, and everybody's there together. And what's funny, everybody in that gym knew exactly what I went through, and they give me that respect without ever asking me what has happened to me. It's almost like people, when they're interested in something, they'll find out from other people trying not to hurt me or disrespect me. And they always see me, and I've heard that from so many people, that this is, you're a perfect role model for this community. And that's what I try to do. Everything I do, it was spontaneous. Getting an acting degree, getting a teaching degree, being a public speaker, being a motivational speaker, a businessman. Everything started from seeing my little brother watching what I do, seeing those kids weight training in school, the bullies. I wanted to set a good role model for the community, for society, for the world, to say, well, that kid is Mirsad. He's come from war. And then he goes on, you know, he's Muslim, he's got those strong cultural values, and everything represents all of my people all around the world. And in my little world that I live in, That's all I need. Like somebody, so many of those successful people that really listen to my story. And I don't want nothing. I just want the kids and future generations to see that as a positive light, that they can insert something for the better future for the humanity, for all of us.
That's a beautiful message, Mirsad. Thank you so much. Obviously, I know this hasn't been easy, and sometimes I don't even think about it. So I do apologize for upsetting you, but I'm eternally grateful because your story will be told to not just people of Stoke-on-Trent, but to all those who access social media, and will try to spread your positive message that despite everything you've been through, we must not ever give up, isn't it, Mirsad? Otherwise, we won't be here, will we, to tell the story and to look after generations like your son. So thank you for sharing his image as well with us today. And we could hear he's playing in the background for all those who were wondering what a little bit of the noise was all about. So thank you so much for your time. I hope we will be able to host. Absolutely. And again, this is Mirsad's book, The Boy Who Said Nothing, and I highly recommend it. It's not an easy read in a sense that obviously it portrays his story when he was fleeing conflict in Bosnia, but it is very important to know how easily the hate can prevail, and what can happen when people forget that we actually are the same. We all bleed the same blood, so, and we all have the same needs of love and respect and family and friends. So let's try to learn from Mirsad's experience and do something positive for our community, just like he did.
Hello, my name is Nato. I send you warm greetings from YMCA North Staffordshire, here in Stoke-on-Trent, UK. It was Paulo Coelho who once said that the only thing tragedy gives us is the opportunity to rebuild our life. For this year's Srebrenica Memorial, as we focus on the theme, Rebuilding Lives, yet again, we honor the memory of those we lost to the unfortunate genocide. We continue, however, to be inspired by the uncommon resilience of the many survivors and displaced people who have risen above hate to spread love and light across new communities. Again, we are reminded that we are stronger together. May love lead. God bless you.